Hi, welcome back for True Colors audiobook, Chapter 21. In the last episode, Michael made a mess of things again by making a heinous accusation against Cassie. But he did do his due diligence in pursuing the truth and found it and resolved things with her, but maybe some damage was done that can't be undone. But Cassie, for her part, showed grace and acknowledged that she too often gets things twisted, and she has made promises that she cannot keep. So let's listen and watch and see how this all impacts their relationship and her ongoing imprisonment at the stockade.
True Colors, Chapter 21. With flagging movements, I cleaned up in the operating bay of the ward. Working without a day off for over 3 months had enfeebled me to the point where wiping blood, tissue, and bone fragments from the saw and the Catlin knife seemed an insurmountable task. The operation had been uncomplicated, Justin skillfully performing the mid-thigh amputation in under 13 minutes. After cauterizing the blood vessels with a hot iron, the stump flap was sewed closed and the patient returned to his bed. I fetched the bucket of sawdust, which we spread on the floor to soak up blood and vomit, and returned to the bay, wondering how I would get through the remainder of the day. Justin was there, smiling. "You were superb today, Cassie." "It's getting harder to keep up with you. Are you trying to set some kind of record for speed?" "I'd be considered sluggish next to the field surgeons I hope to soon be assigned with. They've perfected the technique to where they can perform the same procedure in less than 10 minutes. Being a regimental surgeon was what he'd been working toward and would afford him a great opportunity to apply his abilities. But how would I get along without him? I had come to rely on him to a great degree, not just at work, but emotionally as well. I had never told him just how much. He rightly gauged my misgivings. "I almost feel like I'd be betraying you by leaving, seeing as how it was my idea to bring you here in the first place." "It's not your fault I'm here." I forced a smile. "Besides, you'll have so many confident and efficient nurses about you, you'll never even notice that I'm not one of them." I loved his laugh. "They'll all have scruffy beards and tobacco-stained teeth and will smell real bad. And you think I won't notice?" His expression sobered. "Cassie, I will miss you. What I'm trying to say is, don't say anything, Justin." "Because of Byron? Despite how he's deceived you in the past and how he'll stifle you in the future, you still love him?" I dug my fingers into the soft, pine-fragranced sawdust and let it sift through my fingertips. "Let's just say I'm not yet over him." He sighed and shook his head. "Does he have any idea how fortunate a man he is? I need to get this spread around." He lingered another moment. "When you've finished, come and get me, and we'll tend to Jem's wound." As I scattered the absorbent material over the crimson reminders of the tragic loss of limb I had just witnessed, I wondered if there would ever be an end to the chaotic turns my life had taken in the last few months. With the next thrust of my hand into the sawdust, I learned it was not to be so. A hard object rammed beneath my nail. I withdrew my hand instantly with a cry of pain. After brushing away the dust and seeing no blood had been drawn, I shook my hand in a feeble attempt to rid it of the soreness caused by nail separating from skin. I set the bucket down and with my good hand cautiously groped for the mysterious cause of my injury. Taking hold of it, I retrieved it from the bucket and blew the dust from the surface. The strange item was comprised of 2 brass concentric discs that revolved on a central pivot. The larger disc was about 5 inches in diameter. Around both circles' edges were printed the letters of the alphabet. I turned it over in my hand a couple of times, then rotated the inner disc until it completed 1 full circle. I rubbed my finger across the center of it, wiping away remnants of dust, revealing yet more letters. Holding the object toward better light, I made out the letters CSA, and directly below them, in smaller letters, SS. I wanted to drop the disc, be rid of it, as if it were contaminated matter, but it was frozen in my trembling hand. Gathering my wits, I shoved it deep into the sawdust from whence it came, although how it got there in the first place I couldn't even venture a guess. Having finished my task in the operating bay, I entered the ward, stepping timidly, scanning the faces of the men. Was it one of the patients who had hidden the disc in the bucket? Or one of the medical stewards? A guard? All I knew was that someone had placed a cipher disc used to decode messages in the sawdust, a disc that was the property of the Confederate Secret Service. I spun when a patient called to me, relaxing only a little when he asked for a blanket. Another requested a cup of water, another some morphine powder. I passed these requests on to Private Moss, one of the stewards. None of these men appeared as if anything out of the ordinary had happened. I found Justin in the med room and with forced clarity in my voice told him I was ready to help with Jem. "Good. I've got everything we need here. Let's go." As we started out, he glimpsed down at the bucket of sawdust that was still within my white-knuckled grip. "We won't be needing that." "I'll just set it down." "Where?" A beefy hand grasped the bucket's handle. "Allow me to relieve you of your burden, Miss Golden." My mouth went as dry as the sawdust I carried. Powers wore his charming smile for all in the infirmary to see. "No, thank you, Sergeant. I'll replace it myself." My hand remained fastened on that handle. "But the good doctor is waiting. I really don't mind." "You needn't concern yourself." Our hands were in a veritable tug-of-war over the bucket. A patient a few cots away vomited. I looked up at Powers. "Would you care to go clean up the Yankee puke, or shall I?" Not one to take defeat graciously, he released the bucket with a hard shove. I turned and walked to the sick soldier's bedside. Captured just 2 days earlier and admitted directly to the hospital with multiple slash wounds from an encounter with a considerably large Reb knife, Sergeant James Reagan was leaning over the side of his cot, breathing deeply through his mouth. I placed a hand on his forehead to assess for fever and offer a bit of comfort. "Is this sudden, soldier, or have you felt this coming on?" I skimmed sawdust from the bucket and bent low to spread it so as not to let particles hang in the air near the patients' faces. The soldier, whose stomach contents had taken a leave of absence, answered in a low voice. "Oh, it was quite sudden. It came on the moment I stuck my finger down my throat." I looked up sharply. "You mean I couldn't let Powers take that bucket from you?" Butterflies swarmed inside my stomach. "Why not?" "I think you know why." He kept his voice at a whisper. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You have guilt written all over your face." "Guilt? But I've done nothing wrong." "No, but when a person is hiding something, he or she feels guilty and tends to imagine that people can more than they do." I glanced over his bed to the spot where Powers and I had struggled. "He doesn't know anything about the disc," Reagan said. "I'd like to keep it that way." I attempted to work up a visage of innocence. "What disc?" "The one you discovered while spreading sawdust in the dissecting bay." He positioned himself on one elbow. "You carried the bucket in there looking weary but unconcerned. You came out virtually ashen, your eyes searching for a face as guilty as your own." The patient behind me began to stir in his sleep. I lowered my voice further. "You put the disc in there?" He nodded. "Where did you get it?" "Off a dead rebel spy." "You just happened upon him and there it was?" "No, I'm the one who killed him for it." A man had died over the disc that was now in my possession. My stomach was close to emptying itself of its own contents. A whole lot of Union lives would have been lost had this Reb gotten through to his lines, Miss Cassie. He was willing to die for it, and he died well. I'm grateful it was you who found it after I had to ditch it in a hurry before they searched me upon arrival to the infirmary. "Cassie, are you coming?" Justin called from Jem's cot. "I'll be right there." In hushed tones I told the soldier spy, "I'll leave the bucket by your bed. Nobody'd think twice if you took it upon yourself to spread a bit more of the stuff around. Thank you, Cassie. Don't thank me. I know your work is essential, but I've been on the receiving end in this espionage game and have known betrayal and the pain it brings. I just want to keep it as far from me as possible. Michael arrived the next Saturday morning with a box of supplies. I was sitting on the bench outside my cabin reading the Harrisburg Press that was in the box he had brought the day of his mistaken accusation of me concerning the escaped patients. We had parted awkwardly that night, and I wasn't sure I could ever get past his brutal rejection of my offer to live in Richmond as his wife. Wasn't sure I should try. He dismounted and sat next to me. I believe this is the first time I've come here and found you doing something that wouldn't require a measure of disinfecting afterwards. Although his tone was light, his manner was restrained. It seemed a struggle to make even small talk now. Thanks for the press. It's nice reading news about a familiar place with names I recognize and streets I've traveled. I thought you might enjoy it. I read that President Lincoln made Thanksgiving a national holiday for this year. It was this past Thursday. He nodded. I don't suppose it was celebrated on that day in the Confederate States. He shook his head. I wasn't in a holiday mood anyway. A bittersweet smile crossed his face. Do you remember Thanksgiving 2 years ago? How could I forget the trip to Polly and Bud's to celebrate Maryland's Thanksgiving with his relatives? It was there I had found a new sense of belonging in a close-knit family. It was then I began to realize that what was happening between Michael Byron and me may be of a permanent nature. I remember. Yet another awkward silence lingered until I finally said, I also read where they've turned the battlefield at Gettysburg into a national cemetery and memorial. I suppose it will bring a certain sanctity to the site where so many lost their lives, but some citizens argue it only glorifies the bloodshed. I don't see it that way. I consider it akin to the Israelites leaving behind stone memorials when they entered the Promised Land. Fathers could teach their children about how God showed his love and might by parting the waters of the Jordan and allowing them to enter. My eyes lifted from the newspaper and rested on his pensive countenance as he continued. I hope to one day take my children to Concord or Valley Forge or Yorktown and teach them about the sacrifices free men have had to make in order to defend our liberties. They were so hard won and should never be taken lightly. But Gettysburg was a Union victory. Will you take our children there as well? The word had not escaped his notice. Our children? Such sacrifices were made there as well. I forced my attention back to the news article. It was easier than attempting any sort of personal conversation. It says here Edward Everett gave an eloquent 2-hour oration at the dedication, but Lincoln's address was short and meaningless. Ha! Lincoln is always succinct, but I've never known him to offer a single word that lacked substance. It says, we pass over the silly remarks of the President. For the credit of the nation, we are willing that the veil of oblivion shall be dropped over them, and that they shall no more be repeated or thought of. Only time will tell about that. I'm more concerned about his health. I heard he contracted a case of varioloid in Gettysburg. That's smallpox, isn't it? A mild form. Most people recover without much trouble. His regard seemed genuine, and I wanted to ask him why he cared so much about a man he continued to betray on a daily basis, but I hadn't the strength for what could follow. He turned to face me. Cassie, I need to tell you I'll be gone for most of December. I hope to be back by Christmas, but can't be sure. I see. He rose and went to his horse to retrieve the box of supplies. Glancing down to where midnight was pawing the ground, he said, he seems to be favoring that left foot. He ran his hand down the back of the steed's leg, and when the hoof lifted, he checked for a stone, but found none. He removed the box from the back of the saddle, and once inside the cabin, he set it on the desk, then closed and locked the door. He pulled a small, flat package from inside his tunic and handed it to me. "What's this? Open it." I tore away at the brown paper wrapping and found 6 envelopes inside. Letters, all addressed to me. Where did you get these? I had sent a courier to Washington and asked him to stop by the post office in Alexandria to see if they had saved any of your mail. And they had? They didn't know what else to do with it. It seems you left no forwarding address. A slight oversight on Tessa's part. There are 3 letters from Mandy, one from my aunt in Pittsburgh, one from a friend back in Cumberland County, and even one from Hannah all the way from Hawaii. I had my courier go to your boarding house as well. Sudden hope that my possessions had been retrieved was soon dashed. Mrs. Fillmore did as she was told you requested. She sold everything. She told my man which pawn shop she took the smaller items to, and he went there. But everything had already been sold. I lowered my head, grieving anew over my losses. Everything but this. He reached into his pocket and retrieved a small box. He offered it to me. I slowly lifted the lid. My cameo! I ran a fingertip along the precious ivory profile. I thought I'd never lay eyes on it again. I gave him a detailed description of it. He knew immediately it was the one we sought. I'm surprised it hadn't sold. Providence must have seen to it that it was saved just for you. I fastened it in place. What would the Richmond brass have to say about your smuggling operation? They need never know. His gaze settled on the cameo that adorned my neck. It's beautiful. He stepped closer and fondled the filigree, then ran his fingers along the black ribbon until his hand enclosed the side of my neck. It reminds me of that first night I saw you wear it at the ball. I tensed. Again the conflict. "Cassie," he whispered, but I turned my head. He gradually backed away. Leaving his thoughts unspoken, he turned and left. I hadn't even thanked him. Despite my misgivings toward him, I always felt a deep void within when he left, for he remained the embodiment of the man I loved so deeply. I went to the door and watched as he mounted his horse and rode away, midnight still favoring a sore foot. The one thing that could help dispel my melancholy would be reading my correspondence from those nearest my heart. Opening one of Mandy's letters, I was relieved to read that all was well with her family. She very much enjoyed the Western culture with its more relaxed proprieties, and had made many friends. No sweetheart as yet. She expressed concern over not having heard from me in such a long while, since I had faithfully written her every month. How I longed to wrap my arms around her and share my heartache with her. Her next letter expressed even greater concern over my haunting silence, and she hoped I'd write to let them know I was safe. They could not bear to learn that something had happened to me, too. Me, too? Was she thinking of Eric? I read on and went numb. My worst fears had been realized. Again. I sat on my cot, rocking, hugging the letter to my chest, weeping. The war had taken too much from me already. My mind could not accept this. Without any conceived purpose, I raced to the door and ran outside. Once there, I halted, for there was nowhere I could go for consolation, no one to go to. Michael, if he knew. Justin called to me as he walked from the infirmary. "Where have you been, Cassie? I thought maybe—" "Good Lord, Cass, what's happened to you?" He glimpsed the paper I still clutched in my hand. It's Greg. He's been killed." The ache in my heart intensified when he replied, "Greg, that's—" He didn't even remember my cousin's name. As if the pain was not great enough, I would have to mourn alone. As I turned from Justin, my tear-filled eyes caught sight of a gray figure across the compound standing beside a black horse, lowering its hoof to the ground. Then he mounted and began to trot away. Michael, I breathed more than spoke. I moved in his direction, but Justin took hold of my arms. Cassie, he said, glancing toward the retreating rider, stay and let me help you through this. I watched as the stallion carried Michael nearer the gate. You don't even know him anymore. It was true. I didn't know Michael for sure, and I had just rebuffed his advances again because of my reservations. But this one thing was certain. He knew me better than anyone, and only he could read the deep lines of my heart where my love for Greg dwelt. Breaking free from Justin's grasp, I burst into a full run. I heard him call after me twice, but on I ran across the compound, all else blurred through the watery edges of my eyes except for Michael's retreating form. Michael! He rode on, my voice squelched by the low moaning of the large wooden stockade gates yawning open before him. I ran faster than I thought myself able. He proceeded through the gates. Michael, wait! Shouts from the forest of men around me went unheeded. With my last surge of strength, I raced harder still, sobbing and straining for air, my sides splitting. Finally, tugging on the reins to slow his horse, he glanced back. Horror gripped him. His eyes, wild with fright, lifted to a point above and behind me. His chest strained for a lung-filling breath. No! His terror-stricken cry lingered in the air until it was split by the piercing blasts of 2 rifles being fired at once. Fired at me.
Well, Cassie has received the worst possible news she could about her cousin Greg. And she knows that Michael is the only one who can console her in her grief, and in pursuing him, nearly got herself killed. So I hope you'll return and watch next episodes and see how they tread the waters of grief together and what this means for their relationship and for her time of imprisonment as it continues on and on. Please like and share and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.